Why me? I've asked myself that question 1,000 times. I've asked God more times than that. Why me? The Jews had been living in slavery for over 400 years. Why suddenly is it my job to deliver them from bondage? In 400 years, there was no one stronger, nobody wiser. God couldn't find somebody who had maybe even a little charisma. I was old. I stuttered when I talked. I don't stutter anymore. I got over that. It took me a long time and a lot of patience, but I had a long time. I lived 120 years. Many of those years I spent wandering in the desert. So you see, I had plenty of time to work on those parts of myself that needed work. My anger issues, for one thing. I was an angry man in my youth, passionate, sometimes even moved to violence. But then you must understand, I had a confusing childhood, raised by two mothers, in a palace no less, high walls cutting me off from the people who were supposed to be my people, being told that I was better than those slaves outside the walls building the pyramids, and then being told that I was one of them. So you see, I was getting a lot of mixed messages, not the least of which was the religious one. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So this is the way I begin my story, Why Me? Moses' journey as a stranger in a strange land, which was first commissioned for performance at the J. Paul Getty Center in Los Angeles. I tell it with a good Jewish sense of humor and lots of audience participation. I tell of how the Jews were enslaved by Egypt and how Pharaoh sent his soldiers out to kill all the baby boys of the Jews, and how my mother saved me by putting me in a basket and placing me on the river Nile just upstream from Pharaoh's palace so that his daughter would find me. She did. She brought me out of the water and instantly fell in love with me. Who wouldn't? She wanted to take me home to raise as her own child, but the problem was she was a child herself. She didn't have the first idea how to raise a child. I was like a doll to her. She probably would have gotten tired of her toy in a few weeks and thrown me back in the river, this time without a basket. But just then, my sister Miriam, who had been skulking in the bushes nearby, popped up and said, "Excuse me, I just happened to be skulking here in the bushes, doing my normal skulking in the bushes thing. Usually I skulk in the bushes over there. But today I was... Anyway, I saw that you just brought a baby out of the water. I know a mother, a Jewish mother, who had her own baby thrown into the river by the Pharaoh's soldiers. She has milk and no child to give it to. She could be your baby's nurse." What could Pharaoh's daughter say? It was so convenient. So my mother came and raised me. So I was brought up like a good little Jewish boy right in the middle of Pharaoh's household. I talk of life in Pharaoh's palace, where I first became a stranger in a strange land. I tell of how, as a young man, I accidentally killed one of Pharaoh's soldiers and had to flee into the desert, where again I was a stranger in a strange land. I tell of how I came to Midian, a land where all the people had a different color skin than I had. Again, I was a stranger. I tell of how I married and had children, the first of whom I named Gershon, which means stranger in a strange land. And I became a shepherd and lived happily for what should have been ever after. Again, why me? I'm an old man walking in the desert, tending my flocks. I'm thinking 80 years old is probably time I should think of retirement when I come around the far side of the mountain of Horeb, and what should I see but a bush that's on fire, not being consumed by the flames? Why me? Out of the bush comes a voice of such power I can't tell you. It seems that it's echoing inside my skull and filling all the air around me. "Moses! Moses!" says the voice. "I am here," I say. "Moses, I am the God of your ancestors. I am the God of the Israelites. The cries of their torment have reached me. I have seen how cruelly they are oppressed by Egypt. And now I am going to send you, Moses, to Pharaoh, so that you may lead my people out of Egypt and into the land of milk and honey." And I said, "Me? Why me? Who am I that Pharaoh's going to listen to me?" I stutter. Who am I that even the Jews are going to listen to me? They're going to say, "You? God came to you?" Okay, if God came to you, what is God's name? And what am I going to tell them? And God said, "Tell them, I am he who is. Tell them, I am sent you." oh, that's going to work, I think to myself. But God went on. He said, Moses, Israel is my firstborn son. Pharaoh has taken my firstborn son, and I want you to free my child from bondage. And I said, Pharaoh's not going to let the Israelites out of Egypt. They're his entire workforce. If Israel left Egypt land, nothing would ever get done around there. I know this, said God. That's why Pharaoh must be coerced. I have an idea, I say. You said that Pharaoh took your firstborn son. Why don't you take his? What kind of a God do you think I am? He stormed inside my head. I am not going to take Pharaoh's firstborn son. No, I'm going to turn his water into blood. I'm going to plague him with frogs, mosquitoes, horseflies, locusts, and boils. I'm going to kill half of his livestock with the plague and then cause a hail to come down so hard that it will kill the rest of his livestock. I'm going to plunge Egypt into such a darkness that no light will penetrate. And then I'm going to take his firstborn son. Okay, I say, so I go to Pharaoh. What's going to make him listen to me? I will give you miraculous powers with which to impress upon Pharaoh the power of your one God. What kind of miraculous powers, I say? God says, what's that you're holding in your hand? I said, this is my staff. He says, no, it's not. And suddenly I have a writhing, poisonous snake in my hands. I said, stop it, make it go away. Stop it, make it back. And suddenly it's a staff again. God says, pretty good stuff, huh? Okay, now, put your hand inside your shirt. I do. He says, take it out. I take it out, and it's all filled with disease. He says, put it back. I put it back. He says, take it out. I take it out, and it's healed. He says, do it again, do it again. I said, I get it. You're going to give me magic tricks to impress Pharaoh. He says, go. And I went. You know the rest, the demands, the plagues. I use audience members, children and adults, to act out the part about the plagues. One person is me, one person is Pharaoh, and several people become the plagues, one plague to another. It's a nice, light way of telling a rather dark episode in the story. I talk about how we went out into Egypt together, me leading my people, where again we became altogether strangers in a strange land. Over and over again, they lost faith, and they cried out to me, and I get the whole audience to be my followers, and they cry out to me like this. I say, Moses, they say, in Egypt we had food to eat. Why have you brought us here to die of starvation? And I would turn to God and I would say, why me? And God would always save us, but he never answered my question. I tell of how I went to the top of Mount Sinai and came down with the 10 Commandments to find that the people had again lost faith, at which God became so angry that he decided to abandon them all right then and there. But I came to God and I said, you can't do this. I can do anything I want, he said. I'm God. I said, no, you can't do this. He said, why not? I said, because what would people say? Huh? What would people say of a God who led his people out of bondage only to abandon them in the desert? What would people say of a God who did that to the people he called his firstborn son? And God said, all right, already. You're like a Jewish mother. Nobody's ever talked to me like this before. And I said, that's because you never gave anybody a chance. All the other prophets, you appeared to them in dreams or in visions. You and I, we talk. So we went still out into the desert. He led us through the desert for 40 years. Take a look at a map of that desert. It's not a big desert to wander around in for 40 years. God was leading us in circles. He was testing us. And over again, the people lost faith. Even one time I lost faith, and I called out, why me? Why must it be me to carry this burden? Am I these people's father that you say to me, carry them in your arms across the desert? Kill me now and carry them yourself, or let them wander aimlessly forever. Many people think that it was because of this one time I lost faith that I was not allowed into the promised land when finally we reached there. But I don't think so. When God took me up to the top of a hill to look out over the river Jordan into the land of milk and honey, and told me that I would not be allowed to enter there. This time, I did not ask, why me? In the promised land, I would not have been a stranger. And this, in the end, is the answer to the question, why me? I was chosen for this job because I was the stranger in the strange land. To survive as a stranger in a strange land, one must be wise, one must be humble, one must be adaptable. And there is a richness in wisdom, humility, and adaptability that is different from the riches that are held by the rulers of that land. A white man in this society, in order to survive in your society, American society, in order to survive, need not learn the language or the culture, let alone the culture of the Southeast Asian or the African or the Latino that moves into his neighborhood. But for that Southeast Asian or that Latino or that African to thrive in the white man's culture, he must learn that culture. He must understand that language. I believe that every man, every woman, even every child should live as if he were a stranger in a strange land. We should look for the strangeness that is all around us everywhere, every day, and adapt ourselves to it. Humble ourselves before it and become wise in the process. And then perhaps we will never have to ask the question, why me?